When George Washington took office in 1789, he stepped into a role that had never existed before. The world watched with curiosity and skepticism as this new nation, barely a decade old, attempted to govern itself under a system that was already showing deep cracks. He inherited a nation on the verge of collapse. The streets of many towns were filled with uncertainty, and the air was thick with anxiety about the future. People wondered if the hard-won independence would soon unravel. The United States was a loose league of 13 states, governed by the weak Articles of Confederation. Each state clung tightly to its own power, reluctant to yield authority to any central government. The central government couldn't raise taxes, regulate trade, or enforce laws. Congress could only request money from the states, and those requests were often ignored or delayed, leaving the government powerless to act. The country was drowning in war debt, its currency was worthless, and foreign powers openly disrespected its borders. Britain and Spain tested American resolve, seizing territory and restricting trade, knowing the government was too weak to respond. States printed their own money and imposed tariffs on each other, creating economic chaos. Trade disputes erupted constantly, and inflation soared as each state tried to solve its problems alone, making everyday life unpredictable for ordinary citizens. Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts exposed the government's impotence, terrifying the founders. The uprising, led by desperate farmers, was a stark warning that without a stronger government, chaos and violence could spread. Washington had seen firsthand, as commander-in-chief, how the state's bickering left his army starving and unpaid. Supplies were scarce, and soldiers often went months without pay, eroding morale and threatening the very survival of the revolution. The promise of the revolution seemed hollow under the failing articles. The ideals of liberty and unity that had inspired the fight for independence now seemed at risk of being lost to infighting and neglect. The new Constitution offered hope, but it was just a blueprint. Washington had to make it real. The document laid out a vision, but it was up to him to breathe life into its words and prove that a united government could work. He needed to build institutions, set precedents, and prove that a strong federal government could protect liberty. Every decision he made would set an example for future generations, shaping the very foundation of American democracy. Many feared a new monarchy, but Washington had to show that national strength and individual freedom could coexist. He faced deep suspicion from those who remembered the tyranny of kings, and he knew that trust had to be earned, not demanded. The future of the United States rested on his shoulders. Every action, every word, would determine whether the nation would survive its infancy or fade into history as a failed experiment in self-government. In the years following the American Revolution, the new nation faced a daunting challenge: how to build a stable and prosperous economy from the ground up. Washington knew that a strong nation needed a strong economy, one that could support its people, defend its borders, and command respect on the world stage. To tackle this enormous task, he turned to his trusted aide and Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, a man whose vision for America's financial future was as bold as it was controversial. Hamilton's bold plan was revolutionary. The federal government would assume all state debts from the Revolution, consolidating them into a single national obligation. This move would not only address the immediate financial crisis but also lay the groundwork for a unified economic policy. However, this proposal sparked fierce opposition, especially from the southern states. Many of them had already paid off much of their debt and saw little reason to bail out the more indebted North. They feared losing influence and resented the idea of their tax dollars supporting other states. Hamilton countered that assuming the debts would establish the young nation's credit, making it possible to borrow money in the future and encouraging investment. It would also help bind the states together, creating a sense of shared purpose and destiny. By tying the fortunes of wealthy creditors to the success of the federal government, Hamilton believed he could ensure their support for the new republic. Their financial stake would make them invested in the nation's stability and growth. Critics like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, however, saw Hamilton's plan as deeply unfair. They argued it was a scheme to enrich northern financiers at the expense of southern farmers, and that it threatened the balance of power between the states and the federal government. The debate quickly became about more than just money. It was a battle over the very soul of the nation. Would America be an agrarian society rooted in local independence, or an industrial powerhouse with a strong, centralized government? Ultimately, Washington sided with Hamilton, recognizing that national unity and economic stability were essential for the country's survival. He put the interests of the nation above regional loyalties, setting a powerful example for future leaders. With Washington's crucial support, Hamilton's plan passed through Congress. This set a lasting precedent for federal authority in financial matters, showing that the government could take bold action to shape the nation's destiny. The passage of Hamilton's plan marked the first major step toward building a truly national economy. It paved the way for future growth, innovation, and prosperity, helping transform the United States into a global economic power. The government's newfound ability to manage debt and credit would prove essential, not just for its survival, but for its ability to thrive and expand in the decades to come. In the end, it was Washington's steady leadership and Hamilton's financial genius that made this transformation possible, setting the foundation for the American economic miracle. Hamilton's next move was even more controversial, creating a national bank. The first bank of the United States would stabilize currency and manage government funds. Jefferson argued the Constitution didn't allow it, fearing federal overreach and elite control. Hamilton countered with the doctrine of implied powers, citing the Constitution's necessary and proper clause. Washington, after hearing both sides, approved the bank as essential for national growth. To win Southern support, Hamilton agreed to place the permanent capital on the Potomac, Washington, D.C. This compromise cemented both the financial system and the nation's new capital. The debate set the stage for America's enduring constitutional arguments. With finances stabilized, the government faced a new test, the Whiskey Rebellion. Hamilton's whiskey tax hit frontier farmers hard, sparking outrage in western Pennsylvania. Whiskey was their currency, and the tax felt like distant tyranny. Resistance turned violent, tax collectors were attacked, and rebellion spread. Washington saw this as a direct challenge to federal authority. He issued a proclamation, then led a militia of 13,000 to suppress the uprising. The show of force ended the rebellion without major bloodshed. Washington proved the federal government could enforce its laws. The Whiskey Rebellion set a vital precedent. The United States would not tolerate lawlessness. The new government was no longer powerless. Order and authority had been established. While Hamilton built the economy, Washington and Congress built the legal system. The Judiciary Act of 1789 established the Supreme Court and a network of lower federal courts. 13 district courts and 3 circuit courts created a clear judicial hierarchy. The act gave the Supreme Court power to review state court decisions involving federal law. This ensured uniform application of the Constitution and federal supremacy. Washington carefully appointed respected judges, including Chief Justice John Jay. The new judiciary became a co-equal branch, upholding the rule of law. Washington's choices gave the courts legitimacy and independence. As part of the compromise for Hamilton's plan, a new national capital was born. Washington envisioned a city that would unite the nation and symbolize its ideals. The site on the Potomac was chosen for its central location between North and South. Washington oversaw the project, appointing Pierre L'Enfant to design a grand, open city. The Capitol and President's House were placed to reflect the balance of power. The city's design embodied Enlightenment values, order, unity, and democracy. Though unfinished when the government moved in, Washington's vision shaped the capital. The city became a lasting symbol of the American Republic. It was a capital for a free people, not a king. Washington's bold actions sparked fierce political divisions. Federalists, led by Hamilton, wanted a strong central government and a broad interpretation of the Constitution. Democratic Republicans, led by Jefferson and Madison, championed states' rights and agrarian values. The fight over Hamilton's financial plan and the national bank fueled partisan conflict. Newspapers became battlegrounds, and even Washington's cabinet was split. Washington disliked parties, warning they could destroy the republic, yet his policies aligned more with the Federalists, favoring national strength. The rise of parties became a permanent feature of American politics. The nation's soul was being shaped by these early ideological battles. Washington's leadership helped keep the country together. The presidency of George Washington was a delicate balancing act, a constant negotiation between the need for effective power and the cherished ideals of liberty. As the first president of the United States, Washington faced the monumental task of shaping a new government from the ground up, all while ensuring that the freedoms fought for in the Revolution would not be lost to tyranny. He worked tirelessly to build a government strong enough to maintain order and unity, but he was always careful not to let that strength become a threat to the very liberties the nation had just secured. By supporting Alexander Hamilton's ambitious financial plans, Washington gave the young nation the economic stability and credibility it desperately needed, laying the groundwork for future prosperity and national strength. When the Whiskey Rebellion threatened the authority of the federal government, Washington's decisive response showed the country and the world that the new government had both the will and the means to enforce its laws, but he also acted with restraint to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Washington respected the authority of Congress, understanding that true leadership meant listening to others. He assembled a diverse cabinet, seeking advice from men with differing viewpoints, which helped shape balanced policies and fostered a spirit of open debate. His careful selection of judges ensured the creation of an independent judiciary, a cornerstone for the rule of law and the protection of individual rights. Perhaps most importantly, Washington set a powerful precedent by voluntarily stepping down after 2 terms in office, refusing the temptation of lifelong power. By relinquishing authority, he demonstrated to the nation and the world that the presidency was not a monarchy, but a temporary trust, and that peaceful transfer of power was possible. Washington's greatest achievement was finding a lasting equilibrium between the need for order and the promise of liberty, showing that a republic could be both strong and free. He proved that a government could command respect and maintain stability without resorting to oppression, inspiring confidence in the American experiment. Washington's example defined the presidency for generations to come, setting standards of integrity, humility, and dedication to the public good. The American experiment endured and flourished because of Washington's restraint, vision, and unwavering commitment to the principles of liberty and republican government. When Washington left office in 1797, the nation was transformed. The United States had a stable government, sound finances, and a respected judiciary. The new capital gave the country a symbolic center. Washington's leadership set powerful precedents: the cabinet, executive authority, and peaceful transfer of power. His presidency also left a complex legacy. Political parties and regional tensions would grow. Yet his success in building a strong, balanced government endures. He proved Republican government could work in practice, not just theory. The institutions he shaped have lasted for over 2 centuries. Washington was the indispensable man who turned the Constitution's promise into reality. His legacy is the foundation of the United States.